The dealership experience was another key part of Chevrolet's illusion. Buyers weren't just purchasing a car, they were being sold a lifestyle. Carefully curated showroom models, the cars on display were always the highest trim levels, with every option included. Plush seats, thick carpets, wood-like trim, and soft ambient lighting created an atmosphere of sophistication. Strategic presentation, salesman, directed buyers' focus to luxury-like features, soft-close ashtrays, chrome door handles, and padded armrests, while avoiding discussions about performance, durability, or long-term reliability. Limited test drive routes. Most test drives were conducted on smooth roads where the car's soft suspension felt gliding and effortless. Salesmen carefully avoided rough pavement where the flaws in handling and ride quality would become apparent. These small but powerful tactics ensured that customers left the dealership feeling like they had just bought a luxury vehicle, even if the car itself wasn't truly premium. The clever use of exclusive features. Chevrolet also knew that luxury isn't just about what a car has, it's about what competitors don't have. By offering features that weren't widely available in basic sedans, they made ordinary buyers feel like they were stepping into the upper class. Padded vinyl roofs. Adding a padded textured vinyl roof made cars feel richer and more upscale. This was a cheap addition, but it gave the impression of exclusivity. Opera windows and landau bars. Small decorative details like oval-shaped side windows and metallic trim made the car look more like a Cadillac without adding any actual performance or comfort improvements. Digital clock and fake wood dashboards. Something as simple as a dashboard clock with digital numbers felt futuristic in the 1970s, and while the wood wasn't real, the fact that it resembled high-end interiors was enough to make people feel like they were in a premium car. The use of celebrity endorsements and clever advertising to further cement the illusion of luxury, Chevrolet turned to big-budget advertising and celebrity endorsements. Famous figures from TV, sports, and even Hollywood were used to convince buyers that Chevrolet was the choice of successful people. TV commercials emphasized status over substance. Instead of discussing horsepower, engineering, or durability, Chevrolet's ads focused on comfort, style, and success. Scenes of well-dressed professionals pulling up to business meetings, country clubs, and upscale restaurants made the cars seem like a natural part of an upper-class lifestyle. Luxury-style photo shoots. Chevrolet's print ads looked just like those of true luxury brands. Images of their cars parked in front of mansions, golf courses, and five-star hotels gave buyers the feeling that owning a Chevrolet meant they had made it in life. Celebrity endorsements added credibility. Actors, musicians, and sports stars were used in marketing campaigns to reinforce the message that Chevrolet was a brand for winners. If a famous TV star drove one, surely it was good enough for the average American family. These tactics played directly into human psychology. People aspired to be like the wealthy and successful, and Chevrolet gave them an affordable way to feel like they were part of that elite group. Why people fell for the illusion and why it worked despite all these cost-cutting measures? People never felt cheated. In fact, they walked away from the dealership feeling proud of their purchase. That's because Chevrolet understood the deep emotional connection people have with their cars. Owning a luxury car felt like a personal achievement. For many buyers, especially middle-class Americans, purchasing a car with plush seats, chrome accents, and a prestigious name felt like they had moved up in life. Comparison bias made Chevrolet seem superior. Buyers weren't comparing their Caprice or Monte Carlo to a Mercedes or a Jaguar. They were comparing it to their neighbor's Ford LTD or Plymouth Fury. And in that comparison, Chevrolet always felt like the better, more upscale choice. The car's flaws only became apparent over time. In the first few months, or even the first year, everything about the car felt premium. It was only after several years of ownership that things like suspension wear, interior fading, and powertrain issues started to show up. By that point, Chevrolet had already secured its next wave of buyers, repeating the same cycle with the next generation of models. How Chevrolet's strategy shaped the future of American cars? The illusion of luxury that Chevrolet perfected in the 1970s set the stage for the American auto industry's future. Instead of focusing on true engineering excellence, many manufacturers adopted the same tactics, selling perceived luxury over actual quality. The rise of trim-based luxury instead of developing entirely new luxury models Brands focused on adding premium trims to regular cars. This gave buyers the feeling of exclusivity, even if the core car was still mass market. Marketing became more important than engineering. As Chevrolet had proven, clever branding and advertising could sell more cars than actual technical improvements. Automakers began investing heavily in image building rather than product refinement. Consumers adapted to short-term luxury. Instead of expecting cars that would last 15, 20 years, buyers became accustomed to trading in their vehicles every few years for the newest luxury experience. This shift in consumer psychology benefited automakers more than anyone else. The focus on style, branding, and perceived luxury kept buyers coming back for more, ensuring a constant cycle of new sales and repeat customers. The illusion of luxury that Chevrolet carefully crafted in the 1970S was brilliant marketing, but it came with a hidden cost. Buyers weren't just paying for chrome trim and padded vinyl roofs. They were sacrificing long-term reliability, durability, and even driving performance. The focus on appearance over substance meant that beneath the glossy marketing, Chevrolet's so-called luxury cars had serious flaws that only became evident over time. Many buyers, especially those who had previously driven truly solid American cars from the 1950S and 1960S, began noticing a difference. Their new Chevrolets looked high-end, but didn't feel as well built. The materials felt cheaper, the ride wasn't as smooth after a few thousand miles, and the overall longevity of these vehicles was questionable at best. Cost-cutting in the name of luxury. What Chevrolet was really selling wasn't true luxury. It was the illusion of quality with heavily cost-engineered designs. The reality was that these cars were built to a price, not a standard, with clever shortcuts that kept profits high and manufacturing costs low. Plastic masquerading as wood. The elegant wood-grain dashboards weren't real wood at all. They were thin plastic sheets glued to metal, prone to warping and peeling after exposure to sun. Chrome that wasn't really chrome. In earlier decades, real chrome-plated metal trim adorned American cars. But by the 1970S, Chevrolet had shifted to plastic parts with a thin chrome coating. It looked great in the showroom but cracked and faded quickly. Soft suspension at the cost of handling. Chevrolet focused on a smooth, floating ride to mimic the feel of high-end sedans, but it sets the feel for chrome. And after 40 years of development, sedans? But this came at a cost. Excessive body roll, poor cornering ability, and weak road feedback made these cars feel unstable at highway speeds. Buyers who were used to older Chevrolets, built with heavier materials and more robust engineering, soon realized that their newer models weren't built to last the same way. How the bigger is better mentality backfired. One of the most noticeable changes in Chevrolet's 1970S models was their sheer size. These cars were massive, stretching over 18 feet long in some cases. The idea was simple. A bigger car automatically felt more luxurious. Longer hoods and exaggerated proportions gave these cars a commanding road presence. But this added bulk didn't improve performance or comfort. It was mostly for show. Heavier cars with underpowered engines, due to stricter emissions regulations and fuel economy concerns, Chevrolet had to reduce engine power while increasing vehicle weight. This resulted in sluggish acceleration and underwhelming highway performance. Parking nightmares. What felt grand and prestigious in a showroom became a burden in everyday driving. Maneuvering a 19-foot-long car in a tight parking lot was a frustrating experience, and many buyers found these vehicles cumbersome in city driving. The irony was that true luxury brands like Cadillac and Lincoln also produced large cars, but with better engineering. Chevrolet's approach was about making a statement rather than improving the driving experience. The problem with Chevrolet's luxury interiors. Step inside a 1970S Chevrolet, marketed as luxury, and you'd immediately be greeted with plush-looking seats, padded door panels, and a deep dashboard with elegant trim. But while everything appeared upscale at first glance, the experience of owning one of these cars told a different story. Velour seats that trapped heat and dust. Unlike premium leather found in real luxury cars, Chevrolet's upscale interiors featured cheap velour fabric, which looked elegant at first but was a nightmare to maintain. These seats trapped heat, lint, and dust, becoming worn and saggy within just a few years. Loose-fitting plastic panels. Many Chevrolet owners noticed that interior panels creaked and rattled after a few months. The soft-touch materials weren't truly soft. They were thin, molded plastic panels wrapped in vinyl, prone to cracking and peeling, flimsy door handles and switchgear. Compared to European luxury brands like Mercedes-Benz and Jaguar, Chevrolet's door handles and window switches felt cheap and breakable. Owners frequently had to deal with loose knobs, failing power windows, and broken door latches. Chevrolet's strategy was never about long-term luxury. It was about making the car feel upscale just long enough for the buyer to drive off the lot feeling satisfied. The fuel crisis and the end of an era. If Chevrolet's marketing of luxury had one fatal flaw, it was timing. The early 1973 oil crisis seemed like the perfect moment to sell massive, grand-looking cars. But then the 1973 oil crisis hit. Suddenly, American buyers weren't looking for size and excess, they were looking for fuel efficiency and practicality. Gas prices skyrocketed. Many Chevrolet luxury models were powered by V8 engines that guzzled fuel at an alarming rate. With single-digit miles per gallon, these cars became expensive burdens overnight. A shift toward imports, brands like Toyota, Honda, and Datsun, now Nissan, began offering smaller, more fuel-efficient, and better-built cars. American buyers started to reconsider whether Chevrolet's luxury was worth the fuel costs. The shrinking of American cars. By the late 1970s, Chevrolet was forced to downsize its vehicles, marking the end of the era of massive, over-the-top luxury sedans. The illusion of luxury had worked for a while, but the realities of poor fuel efficiency, rising maintenance costs, and the changing demands of American consumers signaled the end of Chevrolet's 1970s luxury experiment. Why Chevrolet's 1970s luxury cars are still loved today despite all the flaws. Despite the marketing tricks and despite the fact that these cars weren't truly luxurious, many people still have a deep nostalgia for them. They represented an era of excess and optimism. In the 1970s, bigger meant better, and owning a Chevrolet Caprice or Monte Carlo felt like a status symbol. Even if the luxury was mostly an illusion, people felt good driving them. They were built for comfort, not speed. While European luxury cars focused on performance, Chevrolet's 1970s models were built for the long, smooth American highways. The soft suspension and plush seats made them ideal for road trips. The styling still turns heads. Today, these cars are icons of classic Americana. The sweeping lines, massive chrome bumpers, and vinyl roofs capture the essence of 1970s design. Even though Chevrolet tricked buyers into believing they were getting true luxury, the emotional connection people formed with these cars made them legendary. Whether it was the Monte Carlo cruising down the boulevard, the Caprice parked in a suburban driveway, or the Impala gliding down Route 66, these cars defined a generation. Even as Chevrolet's so-called luxury cars started showing their flaws, the company was determined to maintain the illusion. They understood that perception mattered more than reality. Buyers weren't necessarily looking for a car that would last 20 years. They were looking for a car that made them feel special the day they bought it. Chevrolet used every psychological trick in the book to make sure their customers felt like they were stepping into something exclusive, even when the reality was far from it. The art of first impressions. Chevrolet knew that first impressions sell cars. When potential buyers walked into a dealership, they weren't looking under the hood or inspecting the suspension. They were experiencing the car with their senses. How it looked, how the doors sounded when they closed, how the interior smelled. Chevrolet perfected every detail of that experience to ensure buyers felt they were purchasing something upscale. The showroom effect. Dealerships were carefully designed to highlight Chevrolet's so-called luxury models. Cars were polished to a mirror shine, parked under bright lights that made the chrome details sparkle. Buyers saw a perfect version of the car that didn't yet have miles of wear and tear. The feel of exclusivity. Salesmen were trained to use language that reinforced luxury. Words like premium, executive, and limited edition were thrown around freely. Buyers weren't just purchasing a car, they were supposedly joining an elite club. The solid door trick. Many customers judged a car's build quality by how the door sounded when it closed. Chevrolet engineers added extra padding and sound-deadening materials to make the doors sound heavy and solid, even if the car itself wasn't built to the same standard as true luxury brands. Luxury features that weren't really luxury. One of Chevrolet's most effective strategies was giving their cars features that felt luxurious, but didn't actually cost much to produce. These were the kinds of things that impressed buyers in the showroom, but didn't necessarily improve long-term ownership. Opera windows and Landau roofs, these features were purely cosmetic, adding a high-end look without increasing performance, comfort, or reliability. The Landau roof, a final covered rear section, made the car look more formal, mimicking high-end Cadillacs and Lincolns, but it also trapped moisture, leading to rust and deterioration over time. Power everything. Power windows, power locks, and power adjustable seats were once considered premium features. Chevrolet added these to many of their 1970s models, but the motors and switches were often prone to failure, leaving owners frustrated with broken controls after just a few years. Fake stitching and padded dashboards. A true luxury car in the 1970s, like a Rolls-Royce, had a handcrafted leather dashboard. Chevrolet, on the other hand, molded plastic dashboards with fake stitching patterns, tricking the eye into seeing something more premium than it really was. The hidden flaws that buyers didn't notice at first, while Chevrolet was busy dazzling buyers with chrome, padded roofs, and fake wood trim, they were also cutting corners in areas that really mattered. The problem was that most buyers didn't realize these flaws until they had already driven the car for a few thousand miles. Engines that looked powerful, but weren't. Many of Chevrolet's 1970s luxury models had big V8 engines, which seemed impressive on paper. But due to new emissions regulations, these engines were strangled by detuned carburetors and restrictive exhaust systems. A 400 cubic inch V8 in 1978 had less power than a smaller engine from the 1960s, making these cars slow despite their size. Transmission issues. Chevrolet used 3-speed automatic transmissions that felt smooth at first but often suffered from sloppy shifts and early wear. Some models had soft internal components, leading to premature failures. Frame and body integrity problems. Earlier Chevrolet models from the 1950s and 1960s were built like tanks, but by the 1970s, cost-cutting led to weaker steel and thinner body panels. Many of these luxury Chevrolets developed rust issues within just a few years, especially in northern states where road salt was common. The trade-in cycle. Keeping customers hooked, one of Chevrolet's most brilliant but deceptive tactics was keeping buyers on a constant trade-in cycle. The goal was simple: make people upgrade before they realized how flawed their current car was. Flashy new models every few years. Chevrolet ensured that every new model year looked significantly different, even if the actual mechanical changes were minimal. This made older models feel instantly outdated, pushing buyers to upgrade. Dealer trade-in incentives. Chevrolet dealerships offered attractive trade-in deals, making it seem like upgrading was a financially smart move. But in reality, these deals benefited the dealership more than the customer, keeping buyers locked into a never-ending cycle of car payments. Short-lived excitement. Buyers initially felt thrilled with their purchase, but over time, as the flaws became evident, the excitement faded. By the time the car started showing real problems, Chevrolet had already convinced them to trade it in for the next model. Why? Many buyers didn't see through the marketing despite these issues. Chevrolet's marketing strategy was so effective that many buyers never realized they weren't getting real luxury. Several psychological factors played into this. Brand loyalty. Many Americans had grown up in Chevrolet households. They trusted the brand and didn't question whether the quality had changed over the years. Cognitive dissonance. When people make a big purchase, they want to believe they made the right choice. Many buyers ignored or downplayed the flaws of their cars because admitting they were tricked felt worse than dealing with a few mechanical issues. Dealer reassurance. Whenever buyers returned with complaints about their vehicles, dealerships downplayed the problems or framed them as normal wear and tear. This kept people believing that their cars were still high quality, despite mounting evidence to the contrary. The beginning of Chevrolet's reputation crisis. By the late 1970s, Chevrolet was facing an emerging crisis. Buyers were starting to realize that their luxury cars weren't holding up as well as expected. Resale values dropped, reliability concerns grew, and word of mouth began to affect Chevrolet's image. At the same time, foreign automakers were gaining traction. Brands like Mercedes, BMW, and Toyota were offering cars that weren't just stylish. They were well-engineered, durable, and reliable. Many younger buyers, disillusioned with Chevrolet's flashy but flawed designs, started looking elsewhere. What had once been a dominant force in American luxury perception was now facing real competition. Chevrolet had successfully tricked buyers for most of the decade, but the cracks were finally starting to show. By the late 1970s, the cracks in Chevrolet's strategy were becoming harder to ignore. The company had spent years selling an image of luxury, but the reality of mechanical failures, declining build quality, and disappointing performance was catching up to them. Loyal buyers who had once been excited to trade in their cars every few years started asking questions. Why were these cars wearing out so quickly? Why did they lose value so fast? And why did their supposedly luxurious Chevrolet never feel as solid as the Cadillacs, Lincolns, or even European cars they were trying to mimic? The problem of rapid depreciation. One of the biggest warning signs for customers was how quickly their cars lost value. In the 1960s, Chevrolet models had strong resale value, largely because they were seen as dependable and well-built. But by the late 1970s, that reputation had changed. Used car buyers caught on. People who bought Chevrolets new might have convinced themselves that they were getting a luxury experience, but those buying used Chevrolets saw the reality: worn-out interiors, mechanical issues, and a lack of long-term durability. This made used Chevrolet models less desirable, which killed their resale value. Dealerships knew the truth. Even Chevrolet dealerships started to recognize the problem. Trade-in values dropped because dealerships knew that reselling these cars was getting harder. Buyers who had spent good money on what they thought was a luxury vehicle were shocked to see how little it was worth just a few years later. Foreign competition was different. At the same time, Japanese and European automakers were offering cars that held their value better. A Mercedes-Benz or a Toyota might have been more expensive up front, but buyers noticed something important. They still ran well after 5 or 10 years, and they still looked premium. Meanwhile, a Chevrolet from the same period often felt old and worn out much sooner. Rising repair costs exposed the truth. Another major issue that Chevrolet owners faced was rising repair costs. In the past, Chevrolet vehicles were known for being simple, durable, and easy to fix. That was part of what made the brand so popular in the first place, but by the late 1970s, something had changed. Luxury features meant more things to break. The same power windows, electronic climate controls, and automatic seats that had once made a Chevrolet feel premium were now causing constant headaches. Motors burned out, switches failed, and repairs weren't cheap. Cost-cutting in materials made failures more common. Chevrolet had quietly started using cheaper parts to keep costs down. Wiring harnesses were thinner, plastic components were more brittle, and even metal parts were made with lower-quality alloys that rusted faster. This meant that many of these so-called luxury cars started falling apart much earlier than expected. More time in the shop, less time on the road. Many Chevrolet buyers had originally chosen the brand because of its strong reputation for reliability, but by the late 70s, the frustration was clear. Owners were spending more time at repair shops and paying more money for parts that never seemed to last. The public began to notice the decline in quality. For years, Chevrolet had counted on its brand reputation to keep people buying, but by the late 70s, word of mouth was becoming a problem. People who had once been Chevrolet loyalists were now telling their friends and family to look elsewhere. Magazines and reviews caught on. Automotive journalists who had once praised Chevrolet's luxury models began writing more critical reviews. They pointed out how these cars looked good in the showroom, but didn't hold up well over time. Publications like Consumer Reports even started recommending Japanese and European brands instead, a major shift from the previous decade. Car owners shared their frustrations. In an era before the internet, word of mouth was everything. and by the late 1970s, more and more Chevrolet owners were complaining about their experiences, whether it was at gas stations, auto shops, or even at work. Conversations about how disappointing these cars were became common. The comparison to imports was undeniable. Chevrolet still had its loyal buyers, but people couldn't help but notice the difference between their cars and the rising popularity of Toyota, Honda, and European luxury brands. Japanese cars were simpler, more efficient, and more durable, while European brands offered genuine luxury and superior engineering. Chevrolet was trying to play both sides, but it was losing to both competitors. The oil crisis made everything worse. Just as Chevrolet was losing customer confidence, another major event hit the auto industry, the 1979 oil crisis. Gas prices skyrocketed, and suddenly the kinds of big, fuel-hungry luxury cars that Chevrolet was pushing didn't seem like a smart choice anymore. Buyers needed efficiency, not fake luxury. Gas-guzzling V8s, once a symbol of power and status, became a liability. People started trading in their heavy Chevrolets for smaller, more fuel-efficient cars, many of them from foreign manufacturers. Luxury lost its appeal in hard times. In tough economic conditions, flashy features like vinyl roofs and opera windows no longer seemed important. Buyers were focused on value, longevity, and fuel efficiency, three things that Chevrolet's so-called luxury models didn't offer. The shift in consumer priorities was permanent. The oil crisis didn't just hurt short-term sales, it changed the way people thought about cars. Many Americans who had been loyal Chevrolet buyers made the switch to more practical vehicles, and they never came back. Chevrolet's luxury experiment had failed. By the dawn of the 1980s, Chevrolet wasn't fooling anyone anymore. The company's attempt to sell luxury on a budget had backfired. The same tricks that had worked so well in the early 70s, flashy styling, chrome accents, and padded interiors, now felt outdated and irrelevant. People had woken up to the truth, and Chevrolet was left scrambling to fix its damaged reputation. Resale values plummeted. By 1980, many of Chevrolet's 1970s luxury models were worth a fraction of their original price. Buyers who had been promised an investment in luxury felt betrayed. Imports gained permanent market share. Japanese and European automakers, once considered niche players, had firmly established themselves as reliable alternatives. People who bought a Toyota or a Mercedes often stuck with those brands for life, leaving Chevrolet struggling to bring them back. Chevrolet had to rethink its strategy. With luxury no longer working, Chevrolet had to reinvent itself. The company shifted focus toward practicality, efficiency, and more affordable models. But the damage was done. The 1970s had tarnished Chevrolet's image, and it would take years to recover. By the early 1980s, Chevrolet had found itself in a difficult position. The brand that once symbolized American strength, affordability, and even luxury had lost its credibility. Decades of dominance in the auto industry were now threatened by foreign competitors and changing consumer expectations. Chevrolet was no longer the default choice for American families. It was now a brand that buyers approached with skepticism. Disappointed buyers turned away. One of Chevrolet's biggest mistakes was underestimating how much brand loyalty depended on trust. For years, people had returned to Chevrolet because they believed they were getting a quality vehicle at a fair price. But after years of flashy, unreliable models, even longtime buyers started looking elsewhere. The illusion of luxury wore off. Chevrolet's upscale models from the 1970s had not aged well. Owners who had once been proud of their cars now felt embarrassed as their interiors cracked, their vinyl roofs peeled, and their mechanical systems failed. The used car market exposed the problem. By the early 80s, used Chevrolets from the 1970s were cheap and undesirable. A once premium Caprice or Monte Carlo, which had cost a fortune new, was now selling for a fraction of its original price. Buyers could see with their own eyes that these cars didn't hold up over time. Customers who left didn't return. Once a Chevrolet owner switched to a Toyota, Honda, or a European brand, they rarely came back. The difference in quality and reliability was too obvious to ignore. How? Chevrolet's sales took a hit. The result was a major decline in sales. Throughout the late 1970s, Chevrolet had managed to keep its numbers up through aggressive marketing and fleet sales. But by the 1980s, that strategy wasn't enough. Retail customers were walking away. Fewer everyday consumers were willing to trust Chevrolet with their hard-earned money. Sales to individual buyers dropped sharply, while brands like Honda and Toyota were seeing record growth. Fleet sales couldn't hide the problem. Chevrolet had leaned heavily on selling cars to rental agencies, taxi companies, and government fleets. But this wasn't sustainable. Fleet buyers wanted cheap cars, not luxury cars. And Chevrolet's attempts at premium models weren't appealing to them either. Dealerships were struggling. Chevrolet dealers, who had once thrived on repeat customers, now found themselves fighting for every sale. They had to offer bigger discounts just to move inventory, which further hurt resale values and brand perception. Chevrolet's desperate attempts to regain trust by the mid-1980s, Chevrolet executives could no longer ignore the crisis. The company had to find a way to win back customers. But that wasn't easy. They doubled down on affordability. Realizing that their luxury experiment had failed, Chevrolet pivoted back to budget-friendly vehicles. They introduced smaller, cheaper models like the Cavalier, hoping to compete with Japanese brands on price. But this approach had a problem. Chevrolet was no longer seen as trustworthy. They tried to modernize their image. Chevrolet rolled out more fuel-efficient engines and aerodynamic designs, trying to convince buyers that they were keeping up with the times. But it wasn't just about looks anymore. Customers wanted long-term durability. And Chevrolet still had a reputation problem. They rushed new models to market. Desperate to stay competitive, Chevrolet pushed out new designs quickly, often without proper quality control. This led to a new wave of reliability issues, making it even harder for the brand to recover. Why Chevrolet's recovery was so difficult? Rebuilding a damaged reputation isn't easy, especially in the auto industry. Once a car company loses consumer trust, it takes years to regain it. Chevrolet learned this the hard way. Memories of failure lingered. Buyers who had bad experiences with 1970s Chevrolets didn't forget. Even in the 1980s and beyond, people still associated Chevrolet with cheap materials, mechanical failures, and rapid depreciation. Foreign competitors only got stronger. While Chevrolet was scrambling to fix its mistakes, Japanese and European automakers kept improving. Toyota and Honda built their reputations on reliability, while BMW and Mercedes offered real luxury instead of flashy gimmicks. Chevrolet was losing on both fronts. Younger buyers had different expectations. A new generation of car buyers had grown up watching their parents deal with unreliable Chevrolets. These younger drivers didn't care about Chevrolet's past glory. They wanted cars that lasted, performed well, and held their value. The lasting impact of Chevrolet's 1970s mistakes. The fallout from Chevrolet's failed luxury experiment wasn't just a short-term setback. It shaped the company's future in ways that are still felt today. Chevrolet permanently lost part of its market share before the 1970s. Chevrolet was one of the most dominant car brands in the world. After the 1970s, it never fully regained that status. Foreign automakers cemented their place in the U.S. market, and Chevrolet had to fight much harder for every sale. The cheap luxury strategy disappeared. Chevrolet never tried to position itself as a luxury brand again. The failure of the 1970s models proved that true luxury requires real quality, not just fancy styling and marketing tricks. It took decades to rebuild trust. Even into the 1990s and 2000s, Chevrolet was still working to repair its image. It wasn't until later models like the Silverado, Tahoe, and Corvette that the brand began winning back respect. But for many buyers, the damage from the 1970s was never fully erased. Chevrolet's attempt to trick customers into buying luxury cars worked for a while, but in the end, reality caught up with them. Buyers woke up to the truth, and Chevrolet paid the price. Have you ever bought something that looked expensive, only to realize later that it wasn't quite what it seemed? Maybe a watch that had the shine of a Rolex but didn't quite last the test of time. Or a leather jacket that felt premium at first but started peeling within months. Now imagine this happening with a car, something that was supposed to be built to last. Something that symbolized success and comfort. In the 1970s, Chevrolet pulled off one of the greatest marketing tricks in the auto industry. convincing millions of Americans they were buying true luxury when in reality they were getting something, well, far from it. But here's the real question: was it really a trick? Or was Chevrolet simply giving people what they wanted to believe? Stick around until the end and you'll discover how this strategy not only changed Chevrolet's history, but also reshaped the entire car industry. And if you ever owned one of these so-called luxury Chevys, you might see your old car in a whole new light. The 1970S, a perfect time for an automotive illusion. The 1970s were a time of big changes in America and across the Western world. The economy was shifting, fuel prices were climbing, and middle-class families were looking for more than just practicality in a car. They wanted something that made them feel successful. A car wasn't just transportation, it was a statement. It was parked in front of the house, driven to work, shown off to neighbors. A luxury car wasn't just about comfort, it was proof that you had made it. But there was one problem. Real luxury cars were expensive. Brands like Cadillac, Lincoln, and Mercedes-Benz were out of reach for most families. Chevrolet saw an opportunity. What if they could give people the illusion of luxury without the actual cost? What if they could take their existing, affordable models and dress them up to look like something far more exclusive? The power of perception over reality. Here's where human psychology comes in. Studies have shown that people don't always buy products based on logic. They buy based on how something makes them feel. In the world of cars, that feeling often comes from things like shiny chrome, soft seats, and a smooth, quiet ride. If a car looks expensive and feels expensive, then to the average buyer, it is expensive. Even if, underneath, it's built the same way as a cheaper model. Chevrolet understood this better than anyone. Instead of designing entirely new luxury cars from the ground up, they took their regular models, cars like the Impala and the Malibu, and gave them a makeover. A little more chrome here, a slightly fancier dashboard there, a plushier seat cushion, and suddenly, an average family sedan transformed into something that looked like it belonged in a higher class. They introduced models like the Chevrolet Caprice and Monte Carlo, branding them as premium cars, even though they were built on the same mechanical foundations as their cheaper siblings. The illusion of luxury at an affordable price. To make people feel like they were buying into something special, Chevrolet had to be strategic. They introduced slight price increases, just enough to make the cars seem exclusive, but not so much that they became unaffordable. This was another psychological trick. Studies have shown that when people see a higher price, they automatically assume better quality. A Chevrolet that cost a little more than a regular model suddenly felt like an upgrade, even if in reality, it wasn't offering much beyond cosmetic changes. And then came the advertising. Chevrolet's commercials and print ads focused on one thing: the feeling of owning a luxury car. They showed well-dressed families, elegant settings, and smooth, effortless driving. The words used in the ads were carefully chosen: prestige, refined, sophisticated. They never talked about the cheaper materials under the surface or the cost-cutting measures taken during production. The message was simple: if you bought this car, you weren't just getting a vehicle, you were getting status. Were buyers really fooled? Here's the most fascinating part. Did Chevrolet actually trick people, or did buyers willingly believe the illusion? The truth is, people wanted to believe. They wanted to feel like they had bought something special, and for a while they did. Driving a Chevrolet Caprice or Monte Carlo in the 1970s felt like driving a luxury car, not because of what it was, but because of what it represented. But the cracks started to show over time. The fancy chrome trim didn't age well. The plush interiors didn't have the lasting quality of real luxury brands. The ride, though smooth at first, didn't have the engineering refinement of a Cadillac or Lincoln. By the time the 1980s arrived, many of these so-called luxury Chevys were showing their true colors, and owners began realizing that they had paid for a badge rather than true high-end craftsmanship. What you'll discover in this video: so, was Chevrolet dishonest, or were they simply masters of marketing? As we dive deeper into this topic, we'll explore how specific models like the Caprice and Monte Carlo pulled off this illusion, the clever cost-cutting tricks that made them profitable, and why even today modern car companies still use these same tactics to make ordinary cars seem luxurious. By the end of this video, you'll have a whole new perspective on what luxury truly means in the automotive world. And you might even start questioning whether today's luxury cars are really any different. Let's get started. In the 1970s, owning a car wasn't just about getting from point A to point B. It was a statement. It reflected success, stability, and personal achievement. For many middle-class families, a luxury car symbolized that they had moved up in life. It was more than transportation, it was validation. But there was a problem. Real luxury cars from brands like Cadillac, Lincoln, and Mercedes-Benz came with a price tag that most people simply couldn't afford. At the same time, the American economy was in a difficult phase. Inflation was rising, wages weren't keeping up, and the oil crisis of 1973 had shaken the entire auto industry. People were more cautious with their money. They wanted something that looked and felt premium but didn't come with the financial burden of maintaining an expensive luxury vehicle. This is where Chevrolet saw a golden opportunity. The company understood one key principle of human psychology. People don't always buy what they need. They buy what makes them feel good. A car that looked high-end, even if it wasn't truly luxurious, could satisfy that desire. Chevrolet's strategy was simple. Take their existing cars, give them an upscale appearance, and market them as affordable luxury. And just like that, the illusion began. How Chevrolet positioned itself between luxury and affordability before the 1970s. Chevrolet was known as a dependable middle-class brand. It built solid, reliable cars that American families trusted. But when the new decade arrived, the company wanted to expand its reach. Cadillac was already dominating the high-end market, while brands like Ford and Chrysler were also experimenting with making their cars feel more premium. Chevrolet needed a way to stay competitive without losing its core customer base. Instead of developing a brand new luxury car from the ground up, Chevrolet took a different approach. They started with their existing affordable models and made a few strategic changes. The result? Cars that felt premium but were still priced within reach of the average consumer. Take the Chevrolet Caprice, for example. It was introduced as an upscale alternative to the popular Impala. It featured softer seats, a quieter ride, and a few cosmetic upgrades, but underneath, it was built on the same basic platform as Chevrolet's regular full-size cars. It wasn't truly a luxury vehicle, but it felt like one, at least at first glance. Then, there was the Chevrolet Monte Carlo, a sleek and stylish coupe that looked like it belonged in a higher class. Chevrolet called it a personal luxury car, a term that suggested exclusivity without the actual cost of building a true high-end machine. It had a long hood, a formal roofline, and extra chrome detailing. But despite its premium look, the Monte Carlo shared many parts with Chevrolet's more affordable models. It was a trick of perception, one that worked brilliantly. The power of design. How Chevrolet made budget cars look expensive. The biggest challenge for Chevrolet was making these cars feel luxurious without actually spending more money on engineering and materials. Instead of using genuine high-end features, they relied on small psychological tricks to create the illusion of quality. One of the most noticeable design choices was the vinyl roof. In the 1970s, many so-called luxury cars came with padded vinyl roofs that gave the impression of a high-end coach-built vehicle. But in reality, these roofs were often just a cosmetic addition. They didn't improve performance, durability, or ride quality. They simply looked expensive. Chevrolet used this trick on models like the Caprice and Monte Carlo, making them feel more exclusive. Another common feature was fake wood paneling inside the cabin. True luxury cars of the era used real wood trim, carefully crafted to add sophistication, but Chevrolet, like many other manufacturers, used plastic with a wood grain finish. It gave the appearance of elegance, but it wasn't the real thing. Buyers didn't seem to mind. As long as the dashboard and door panels looked premium, the illusion was enough. Then there was chrome detailing. In the 1970s, chrome was associated with wealth and style. Chevrolet added extra chrome to grills, bumpers, and side moldings, making their cars stand out on the road. But unlike the thick, durable chrome used in high-end brands, much of Chevrolet's trim was thin and prone to rusting over time. Again, it was all about initial perception rather than long-term quality. How Chevrolet's strategy played with consumer psychology. One of the most fascinating aspects of Chevrolet's approach was how well it tapped into the way people think about status and value. Studies in consumer psychology have shown that people are drawn to products that appear to offer a premium experience at a lower cost. This is known as affordable luxury syndrome, the idea that people want to feel like they're getting something exclusive without the full price tag. Chevrolet understood this and priced their cars accordingly. The Caprice and Monte Carlo were more expensive than their standard models, but they were significantly cheaper than a Cadillac or Lincoln. This mid-tier pricing made buyers feel like they were getting a deal. They weren't spending Cadillac money, but they were still driving something that looked premium. That small price increase created an illusion of exclusivity, even though the cars themselves weren't that different from Chevrolet's base models. Did it work? The sales numbers tell the story. The results spoke for themselves. By the mid-1970s, the Chevrolet Caprice had become one of the best-selling full-size cars in America. The Monte Carlo was also a massive success, helping Chevrolet dominate the personal luxury. People loved these vehicles not necessarily because they were true luxury cars, but because they felt luxury enough for the price. It wasn't until years later that some buyers realized the truth. As time passed, the cheaper materials began to wear down. Vinyl roofs cracked, plastic wood trim faded, and chrome lost its shine. By the 1980s, many of these so-called luxury Chevys started showing their age, and the illusion of high-end quality faded. But by then, Chevrolet had already won. They had sold millions of cars and changed the way people thought about luxury. This strategy wasn't just a short-term marketing trick. It shaped the future of the car industry. Even today, many automakers use the same tactics to make everyday cars feel more premium than they really are. Chevrolet wasn't just selling cars, they were selling a dream, and for millions of people, that dream was worth every penny. Chevrolet's success in the 1970s wasn't just about marketing, it was also about maximizing profit. The company knew that to maintain affordability while creating the illusion of luxury, they needed to cut costs wherever possible. This required a careful balancing act. The cars had to look upscale and feel comfortable, but they also had to be built cheaply enough to keep production costs low. This is where Chevrolet's strategy became truly brilliant. One of the first areas where costs were reduced was the build quality of materials. Unlike true luxury brands that used high-end steel, real leather, and handcrafted wood, Chevrolet opted for cheaper alternatives that could mimic the appearance of expensive materials without the cost. For example, instead of genuine wood trim, they used wood grain decals on plastic dashboards. These decals looked impressive at first glance, but over time, they faded, peeled, and cracked under sunlight. Similarly, while Cadillac and Lincoln used thicker, more durable chrome, Chevrolet used thin, chrome-plated trim, which gave a flashy look but often rusted or flaked off after a few years. The result? Buyers were captivated by the shine and polish when the car was new, but long-term durability was sacrificed to save costs. The truth behind plush interiors inside the car, Chevrolet made sure the seats felt luxurious, but that luxury was often only skin-deep. Instead of high-quality leather, they used vinyl upholstery, which looked and felt soft when the car was new, but had a tendency to crack and wear out quickly. In high-end vehicles of the time, real leather developed a soft patina over time, enhancing the car's character. But in many Chevrolet models, the vinyl eventually dried out, leading to splits and an aged appearance that made the interior feel cheap in just a few years. The padding in the seats followed the same philosophy. Instead of high-density foam that retained its shape over the years, Chevrolet often used softer, lower-cost padding that felt comfortable at first, but flattened out over time. This meant that while the car might have felt luxurious on the test drive, after several years of daily use, the seats lost their support and looked worn out. Soundproofing, the illusion of a quiet ride. One of the most noticeable differences between a true luxury car and a standard vehicle is how quiet it is on the road. Cadillac and Lincoln invested heavily in high-quality insulation and soundproofing, ensuring that road noise, wind, and engine sounds were kept to a minimum. Chevrolet, however, had to find a cheaper way to create the same effect. Instead of using thicker steel panels and advanced insulation materials, Chevrolet relied on basic sound-deadening pads and extra-thick carpets to absorb noise. This worked to an extent. When the car was new, it felt quieter than a regular sedan. But over time, as road wear took its toll and the materials began to degrade, the cabins of these so-called luxury Chevys became noticeably noisier. This cost-cutting trick worked because human perception tends to focus on first impressions rather than long-term durability. Buyers test drove these cars in a controlled environment, smooth dealership roads, clean interiors, and well-maintained vehicles. It wasn't until years later that the differences between a true luxury car and a Chevrolet became obvious. Engine performance, power without precision. Luxury cars of the 1970s were known for their smooth, refined powertrains. Cadillac, for example, had massive V8 engines designed for effortless acceleration, paired with transmissions that delivered near-seamless shifts. Chevrolet, on the other hand, took a different approach. To make their cars feel powerful, Chevrolet equipped them with large displacement V8 engines, but they often lacked the precision engineering of high-end brands. The engines produced plenty of horsepower and torque, giving the impression of strength and luxury, but they weren't built with the same attention to refinement. This meant that while they delivered decent straight-line performance, they often lacked the smooth, vibration-free operation of more expensive cars. The transmissions followed the same pattern. True luxury cars of the time had smoother, more advanced automatic transmissions, while many Chevrolet models used simpler, cost-effective gearboxes that sometimes shifted harshly or hesitated under load. It was another way to create the illusion of performance while keeping costs low. Marketing magic, selling a dream instead of a product. None of these cost-cutting measures would have mattered if Chevrolet hadn't mastered the art of selling perception over reality. The company's advertising campaigns were carefully designed to appeal to emotions rather than logic. Instead of discussing technical specifications or durability, the ads focused on how the car made you feel. Magazine spreads featured successful-looking families stepping out of their Chevrolet Caprice, with headlines emphasizing prestige, class, and sophistication. Television commercials showed smooth rides through scenic landscapes with soft jazz music playing in the background, creating an atmosphere of exclusivity. But they never mentioned that underneath the sleek design, the car was built on the same foundation as Chevrolet's more affordable models. Chevrolet also leveraged consumer psychology by using price anchoring, by positioning the Caprice and Monte Carlo slightly above their base models but significantly below Cadillac and Lincoln. They made these cars seem like a bargain. Buyers felt like they were getting a luxury experience at a lower cost, even though they were primarily paying for aesthetics rather than engineering. Longevity vs. first impressions. The most telling part of Chevrolet's strategy was how these cars aged. When they were brand new, they gave owners a sense of pride and prestige. The chrome sparkled, the vinyl roofs gleamed, and the interiors felt plush. But as the years went by, the shortcuts in materials and build quality became more evident. The vinyl roofs that once looked elegant started cracking and peeling under harsh sunlight. The chrome trim began rusting and pitting, losing its showroom shine. The plastic wood-grain dashboards faded and warped, revealing their true nature. The seat padding wore down, making long drives less comfortable. By the time these cars were 5 to 10 years old, many of them had lost the premium feel they once had. Unlike true luxury cars, which often aged gracefully, these Chevrolet models showed their cost-cutting origins over time. But by then, Chevrolet had already won. The cars had been sold in massive numbers,